We are joined once again by Max Goodman, who is at spring training finally. After a couple weeks of talking to him when he was still in the Northeast. Max, how you doing? How's Florida?
I'm doing great. Yeah, no, everything's going well. Catching up, a lot of new faces to meet, and you know, coming down and going right into the grind of the long drives and the games and the long days at the facility. It's been good. It's definitely a lot to get used to again, but no place I'd rather be. So it's been fun.
Because you weren't there to start, does it feel like you showed up to and it's like already the school season had started and you're the new kid in school and it's like, oh, there's already been a month of school?
Yeah, I mean, I've been going up to some players to say hi and catch up with them, and they've been like, "Where were you? Like, we haven't seen you around."
They're like, holy shit, you're tall.
Well, a lot of them already know that, but yeah, like I said, the new faces, obviously Juan Soto and those guys are there, but it's a
Yeah.
lot of non-roster guys and prospects I haven't met yet. I think it's almost 70 guys in that clubhouse in Tampa, as well as changes to the coaching staff and some front office folks that are around. So it's a lot of, hey, how are you? How's your winter still for me? And we'll go from there.
This is a key time for you when you're down there, I assume, right? Because this is where you're really building relationships and like building that rapport with the guys that will carry into the season and beyond. So I can imagine just the importance of being down there and with your job. Just trust is huge. Being able to build that rapport with these guys is huge. Is that one of the first things you're identifying? Is like, hey, I gotta, or are you identifying like guys that have the potential to be in the major leagues in 2 years or something, and going after, some of them to build that early relationship? Is that kind of an emphasis?
Definitely. I mean, some of the best advice that I've ever gotten was from Ken Rosenthal. I don't know if I've told you guys this story before, but this was a
No.
couple years ago when I was brand new, basically in the industry, and I introduced myself to him and was asking how he's been able to, have such a foundation with players and organizations around the league. And he basically said from his days when he was on the beat with the Orioles and the Baltimore Sun, just to ask players how they're doing, to ask about their hobbies and their families and off the field stuff, so that when you go up to them and you have a question about their 0 for 4 or something like that, it doesn't come across as you just need them for work, like you have a pre-existing relationship. And so I'm only a couple years in. The Yankees are the cream of the crop in terms of the superstars that are in that room and the organization that they run. So I have a lot of room to grow in terms of getting better at that. But that's always a goal. And if you see someone sitting at their locker and you can come up with a conversation starter to go, like if someone played in the Big Ten in college, I always go over and tell them I went to Northwestern and ask them about their experience there, that kind of thing. I speak a little Spanish. My grandpa was from Cuba, so
Nice.
I always try to let them know about that. That's definitely a work in progress too. But yeah, I mean, this is a great time when folks are in a good mood. They're out in the good weather. They're trying to fight for a spot, but a lot of the veterans are just easing in and getting their work in. So more access during the day. Clubhouse times are different than it is during the season. It's a great stretch, and that's why I love coming down here. And selfishly, you get to go to the driving range when you have a little time and go to Publix, that kind of stuff.
Publix.
I imagine you and Ken Rosenthal is like the judge in Jose Altuve picture.
The other day he was talking to Judge, and it's a simple, because I'm like just a little shorter than Judge, and it's a similar height differential, but Ken's great. It's always great having him around.
Yeah, so I've had Andy Martino on the pod a few times. He's reporter for SNY, I'm sure you're familiar with, but he talked about during COVID that when everything went to Zoom interviews, that reporter player connection just completely went out the window, because everything was just so like, here's your 10-minute Zoom interview, and you can't build a relationship that way. So I don't know how much you were working during COVID. Were you on a beat during then?
I started the Yankees Sports Illustrated Fan Nation site at the very end of 2019, showed up to spring training in 2020. And after a couple weeks, everything shut down. Yeah. So that was how I started covering Major League Baseball. I mean, I had interned in Miami. I know we're going to talk about this, covering the Marlins in 2018. So I was in a clubhouse then for 10 weeks. And that's when I really fell in love with it and wanted to pursue it going forward. But I was still a wide-eyed college kid, and the Marlins clubhouse at that point was a lot different than it was, years prior when Stanton and Yelich and those guys were there. So it was a tough way to adjust, but I've definitely leaned on all the other reporters that cover the Yankees because it's such a big beat and media market. So you're always picking their brains, and Andy's another experienced and wise reporter that's been around for a long time.
So you've been there for about a week. What are your impressions? Do you have any takeaways from being in the room now at spring training?
First thing that comes to mind is just the talent of pitching that exists there in terms of the non-roster guys, the Nick Birdies, the Dennis Santanas, the folks that are competing for a spot. I was on the field yesterday in Port St. Lucie, and bullpen coach Mike Harkey was there, and I was just asking him, what do you make of the guys that you have? And the consensus is that this is just one of the best groups that's been there in years. And you look back the last couple of years, it was Lucas Litke was the guy that earned a spot. Ian Hamilton, obviously he's a key piece for them now. I think you could make a case for a lot of different folks, as much as Birdie has been the spring standout with the stuff that he has, because he's been electric. And I got to watch him in Sarasota a couple of days ago when he almost made a guy fall down with an off-speed pitch, and he's also throwing 100. And we were sitting behind the scouts that were behind home plate, and they're writing feverishly in their notebooks. They've got their radar guns that's popping up 98. So he has a case to make the team, I'd say, with the Canely injury. We'll see if he's ready for opening day, and the fact that I think there was already one, maybe two spots open in the pen. So also just on the pitching side, the rotation. I mean, I think that the vibe around the rotation, I wrote this the other day, is so different than it was this time last year, because we're getting up to the anniversary of Rodon's day that he got hurt, when they announced that he was hurt. So
are we going to celebrate that? Is that an anniversary?
He's pitching. He's pitching today, isn't he? Yeah,
he is. He's pitching in Tampa.
I'm knocking on wood for you.
Even when he gave up the 4 home runs in a live session. Just the mood surrounding how he had gotten rocked in a live BP was totally different than you would think that it would be. Yeah,
he had a good response to it. Yeah.
So no injury concerns with the starting 5. Clarke Schmidt is adding a pitch, and he's been pitching well. Marcus Stroman is easing in. Nestor Cortez seems to be distancing himself from the shoulder stuff. So it's good spirits across the board, and I think that the pitching staff has a really good chance to be good this year. But health like this is so, what's the word I'm looking for? It can change so quickly, right? Yeah. So the fact that it's only March 6th, I mean,
it's fleeting.
We'll check
baseball, in baseball, health, especially on the pitching side, is so fleeting, because one guy goes down in the rotation and that completely changes everything.
And that's a good transition, because I think when we spoke last week, and even before that, Snell and Montgomery, the guys that are still on the market, were certainly still seemingly in play, but it seems like a lot of the talk has distanced from what the Yankees are, even though Cashman's saying that still talking to everybody, still in the mix with conversations. But you mentioned Clarke Schmidt, being that 5th guy. That would probably be most likely this become a swing guy if somebody were to be added at this point. But him adding that changeup, this is the 2nd year in a row that he's adding a pitch. He attempted the cutter last year. I think this changeup seemingly is like a sinker grip that will play off of his repertoire. And I know that I read the article that you wrote about it, where he modeled Kevin Gausman. But yeah, can you just talk about the need for him and why he was looking for something? Because he's one of the guys that has the largest amount of pitches, I'd say, for the Yankees in their starting 5. So the fact that he needed to add another one, what was behind that?
Sure. When he came up and he was the top prospect, it was all about his breaking stuff. The fact that he can spin it. Like you said, in the last couple of years, he's really found a groove with the hard stuff. So now I think that he was just trying to optimize a grip, and the way that he described it to us is having it be more of a split change adds more depth to the pitch. And I guess the shape of it then complements better with the fact that he has the sinker going one way, the cutter going another way, and obviously the bigger break sweeper curveball that he also has. You mentioned it was Gosman's pitch. He said that he was looking to see how he can change his grip and watch the slow motion camera from center field from a start that Gosman made at Yankee Stadium. And he was like, oh, I could throw that pitch, and started to practice with it. And it took off from there. Stroman recently made a tweak where he was just messing around and started to have his hands higher and closer to his chest when he was in his motion and delivery. So, that's a situation where, I guess both of these are situations where these guys are just constantly making tweaks and deciding different things on their own and bringing it to a pitching department that has excelled recently in terms of bringing the best out of arms. And Schmidt was saying that this spring, sometimes he'll hear chuckles behind him from, guys on the analytics staff and, pitching coaches, Matt Blake, Desi Druschel, who's an assistant. And that's kind of an indication for him that, okay, this pitch is really starting to look good. And now in the next month, start to use it more against hitters. He used it only 5 times against the Marlins the other day. But the changeup last year was a pitch that he used 1.5% of the time in the entire season, and he had really poor results with it. So anything in terms of the workload increasing with that pitch, but also the results increasing, it's going to make him better as he, continues to improve with his other parts of his arsenal too.
It's such a feel pitch too. It's such a feel, like that grip is so important for him. And that makes a lot of sense that, you find a grip that feels good, that you can execute, and then allow the analytics department essentially to kind of make some tweaks to that grip and the way that you're holding it or the way that you're releasing it, to kind of pinpoint how it can be the most effective. But yeah, you got to feel comfortable with it in your hand first and foremost. I think that's one of those like underrated things that gets lost sometimes. If you don't feel good with it in your hand, especially a changeup, because you're choking up on it a bit, it's such a feel pitch that glad he found a seemingly, we'll see how the results are, but something that feels good in his hand at least.
Did he or anyone that you spoke with talk about it being used against lefties? Because that was his biggest struggle last year, was against lefties. I put down in notes here, he allowed an 875 OPS to left-handed batters last year compared to a 682 to right-handed batters. So like he was pretty effective against righties. I mean, 682 still isn't great, but 875, like you can't, I mean, that's an all-star level player you're allowing against left-handed batters.
Right. I mean, that was the narrative all of last year, the fact that he couldn't get lefties out. And I think that later in the summer, he started to get better in that. And it was, the ability to pitch later into games and get through a lineup multiple times. He didn't specifically mention using that pitch against lefties, but I think that the getting deeper into games was part of it because, just in a Grapefruit League start against the Marlins, the second time through the order was when he used that pitch a little bit more. So you're changing the hitters, plan as they're coming up. And like you said, this is a guy that has 5 pitches, if not even more. Who knows what he's going to add or tweak during the season. So if he can stow that pitch away through the first time and then change an eye line with it, whether it's a lefty or a righty, second and third time through the order, this is a guy that's now entering his second season in the rotation as a full-time starter. So anything that he can do to, add to his maturity and his effectiveness, but also his wherewithal to be able to get deeper into the game and help the bullpen, because that's your number 5 starter. You need to make sure that he's not getting, bounced after 4 innings during the regular season consistently. So I think that it'll help him in that sense. Maybe he'll use it early and then switch to other pitches later on. I mean, that's the cat and mouse game that you'll see from everybody.
And for him, the one of the biggest things that I've noticed over, his stretch here is his control. And it's not necessarily the ability to throw strikes, but it's the ability to put the ball where he wants it. There's early on, you see the glove moving a lot, when they were between him and the catcher. So he wasn't hitting his spots.
He was throwing a lot of fat pitches, especially to lefties, like
a lot of things over the
just
plate,
leaking in the middle of the plate. Yeah.
So if he's able to, and that's why I go back to like the comfortability with him holding the baseball, and allowing that release point for him to feel good about that is such an important piece, because he doesn't really have a problem throwing strikes. Like you said, it's about hitting those spots when you need to hit those spots with two strikes or against a lefty, so that you're not leaking over and hitting the barrel of the bat. That's where, to me, you need to see that maturation of his game and how he's able to effectively work through it through a count. So I'm very interested to see how this changeup works, because it does seem like it complements what he has going well at this point in his career.
Look, you said it. It's maturation, because early on, strike throwing was at the base level of the definition of strike throwing. That was a concern for him. He couldn't fill up the zone. Now he's starting to improve in that, and you see that his walk rate went down this past season. But just because you're throwing strikes doesn't mean that you're getting hitters out. There's a difference between dotting where the glove is and having the correct shape than just not walking people. So I think that that's the next step that he can take this year. And, he's always picking the brains of those around him in that corner where all the starting pitchers are in the Yankees clubhouse at Steinbrenner Field, but also
is it literally
at
a
Stadium.
corner? Like they're all in a corner?
Yeah, you walk in and, some other pitchers are in there, Nick Ramirez and Ian Hamilton, Luke Weaver as well. But he's right in the area where Cole and Stroman and Rodon are. Makes sense that they'd put them all together because they're going to talk shop. And, Stroman is a great example of someone that can help Schmidt as well as another sinker baller. I think they have a good relationship so far too.
Did he actually talk to Goodman? Did he speak with him, or are you just saying he modeled the pitch after what Goodman was doing?
What he told us is that he modeled it after him. I don't know if they communicated.
Because that's always interesting to me when pitchers on opposing teams help each other like develop pitches and stuff. Because I remember there's two famous examples I always think of. The first one is when Mariano Rivera taught Roy Halladay how to throw a cutter, and at that point Roy Halladay was like pitching complete game shutouts against the Yankees every time. Like, what the hell, Mariano? Why did you do that? And then also, this was before Schilling's with the Red Sox, but Roger Clemens coached him to throwing a splitter. And then, Curt Schilling's career was lengthened by 7 seasons because he had a splitter. And those two always pissed me off because, like, why did you guys do that? But it's like, it obviously happened. So I was curious if Goodman actually and him actually spoke.
No, I mean, that's a question, we'll be in Dunedin in a couple days. So if I can grab Goodman, I'll ask him. Something to keep an eye on all year long. But then you think of, when Corey Kluber revolutionized the pitch that Michael King had, the Kluber ball, right. the breaking ball all the way across
But they were
zone.
teammates.
Right. But, any way to help and the technology that exists nowadays, it's different. Like, you don't have to just go over and ask someone.
Right.
Like, there are cameras and Rapsodos and Statcast information about the grips and the shapes and the spin rate and all that good stuff. So it's all accessible to everybody.
Steal like an artist. That's what they're looking at. And how many times has the advice gone to a player and then it's just never worked effectively?
Oh, I'm sure.
Well.
We don't hear about those.
Exactly. Yeah.
We hear about the ones where one Hall of Famer teaches another Hall of Famer a pitch.
Yeah,
those are fun to talk.
Relax
about.
on calling Schmidt and Goodman Hall of Famers, but
okay. You know who I was talking about. All right, let's talk about Derek Dietrich and his new position with the Yankees, culture and accountability coordinator. What the hell is this?
And hold on, before you say this, just so you know, Max, I have a bone to pick with the New York Yankees. I've heard from Levine in the past. Levine has monitored some of the things that we have done. So I think he's still listening. But we have talked about a common sense department that needs to be into the New York Yankees for such a long time. The common sense department, understanding like how a guy can do in a new market, just the things that everyday people are looking at that seemingly the Yankees have not looked at. This sounds like a direct result of this conversation from multiple years, a culture and accountability. That is common sense in different words. So I'm very curious to see how this thing transpired and why Dietrich for this position.
Well, we could talk about this for another hour, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. I covered Dietrich when I was an intern at MLB.com in Miami in 2018. That was his last year there before the iconic summer with the Reds where he was, making an eye black mustache and doing bicep curls in the dugout. So I went up to him in a Jupiter the other day and asked if he remembered the tall, chubby ginger from New York City, and he did. So that was cool because it's been so many years since then. But I just started picking his brain about this new role that he has, and he said that it happened organically. He never really left. He had the suspension, which he explained to me was a stimulant, something from a pre-workout that he took. So it wasn't a performing enhancing drug. And he wants to be able to make sure that no one else makes that kind of mistake going forward. And the sense that I got is really just he's an advisor to all different affiliates within the organization, from the big league level down to some of the youngest prospects within the system, just as a resource to them, right? I mean, he was a versatile defender when he played in the big league, so he's going to be working with guys about playing different positions. He was always passionate about hitting, so he'll be in the cages with the Yankees hitting coordinators and hitting coaches, and also the unique perspective that he has, because he played 6+ years of MLB service time, spent almost that much time in the minor leagues over the years, and then also the last 2 years he's been with the Yankees, so he has a firsthand knowledge of what the culture is behind the scenes with the Yankees organization. And he's 34, so he can relate to some of these guys. He's not too far removed from playing in the bigs, as much as his last opportunity was 2020, if I remember correctly. So, is it similar to what kind of presence like a Nick Swisher has? I guess a fan could compare that, because they have the big, bulky, personality and physique. But, when I then went up to Anthony Volpe, who crossed paths with Dietrich in the minors when he was in Somerset, and, he instantly lit up when I mentioned Derek's name, and legitimately had a couple stories about how he was taking guys out to dinner, teaching them lessons about what you need to look out for as you climb through the minors and then also get to the major leagues. So this isn't just, you're bringing a guy in who's a fun name, who's going to, hype guys up in the dugout. I think there's a little more substance to it. And so far he's from the folks that I've talked to in the last couple of days, so far he's had an impact in this new role, and we'll see where it goes.
So you mentioned that he's going to be, speaking with and kind of going across the affiliates as well. Is he going to be traveling with the major league team, or is this
seems like
something that's spring training?
Position,
yeah.
Right?
Where is he going to be?
He said a little bit of both. Everything really. He said he'll be in the Bronx. Didn't mention if he'll be traveling with the team on the road, but I guess that's possible. But otherwise, it's, I don't know if it'll be a home base, but it'll definitely be in Tampa, because they have the player development complex there and an affiliate there as well. But also, parachuting in and out with the different minor league clubs and just building relationships, trying to help in any way he can, and capitalizing on the time that he's there.
One thing you mentioned about like mentoring the young players, especially in the lower levels of the minors, taking them out to dinner and things like that. I do, not being sarcastic anymore about this seemingly made up position. That is important, because those guys, they get into rookie ball and they get into single A, and like they have no money. Like they're working so many hours between practice and travel and games. And like we've heard stories like of how the food is just terrible. Like they're eating fast food, or they're eating scraps. So like having a guy who's made a little bit of money taking you out to, it doesn't have to be the greatest thing, but just like out to a dinner, to a grocery store or whatever. Like I do think there is an importance there.
Well, and this was different, where he wasn't just there for a couple days on a rehab assignment. Like He was trying to, revitalize his career. And then when he got suspended, Volpe was telling me that in AAA, he was still the life of that clubhouse and working as hard as anybody else, even when he wasn't allowed to play for the rest of that year. So I think just the dedication that he showed to helping other people within the organization when he was there maybe paved the way to him coming on in this new role. But it is a new position. He seems pretty, excited about it, and has a chance to pursue a World Series, because he didn't have a chance to do that when he was a player, being with the Marlins all those years. So we'll see what happens, guys.
So he would get a World Series ring for this. Do we have a tally on the amount of coordinators and advisors and assistants twos that the Yankees have?
Yeah, what kind of an envelope is he getting at the end, and who's in charge of that this year, if that's the case?
They've got dozens of these guys. Like Dietrich, I'm not comparing, because Andy Pettitte came in last year or 2 years ago as like a pitching coordinator. Like you mentioned Nick Swisher. Like all of these guys have come back.
Does Swisher actually have a job title, or is he just like Department of Fun?
Yeah, that's his job title.
I don't know his job title, but I think he has
Yeah. He's like an ambassador.
Yeah. All right. Well, that I think is all we've got for you. Scott, you got anything else for Max?
No, man, I'm curious. I know a lot of guys are going down. Well, Spencer Jones, actually, yeah. One more thing, Spencer Jones, impressions of him in person. Obviously, the whole swing and miss thing. We talked about this before you came on here, but the fact that he did not swing and miss at a ball, 82 pitches, I think he saw, something like that, is incredibly impressive after striking out as many times as he did last year. It seems like, his approach has really buckled down. He's got a good eye for the ball. Just what are your impressions of seeing him in person? Because everything is pointing to an impressive guy.
I know sometimes spring results can be, ballooned in one way or the other, and sometimes you can't really take what a player or a prospect does in Grapefruit League play as what, the improvements that they're actually making. But for him to have, almost 20 plate appearances and never swing and miss, when that was such a big issue for him last year in the minors, and that's kind of been his like fatal flaw or main deficiency when you think of whether or not he's going to be able to be a star at the next level. I mean, that's a clear case of someone that's been working on that and is improving in terms of his swing decisions. He hit the 470-foot home run, which I didn't see in person, but that's obviously going to be the highlight takeaway of the spring. But, seeing him go the other way and show that he can hit the ball to all fields, gliding on the outfield grass, a strong defender, stretching singles into doubles. And I don't think he had any steals, but, showcasing his speed and really just overall fitting in pretty well. He stands out with his height and his youth, but, he was very close to Juan Soto in that clubhouse in terms of where his locker is. He's been compared to Aaron Judge quite a bit over the years, obviously, but he really took advantage of his, couple weeks at big league camp. And,
Yeah.
It's a formality that he was reassigned yesterday. So don't think of that as a demotion or anything like that. He's going to now be over on the player development side, and he'll still play in some games the rest of the way. He wasn't going to make the big league roster to start the season, but I think there's an above zero chance that he could play in the big leagues later on. I think that would be more of a sign that things aren't going well in the big leagues on the outfield side, because it's now such a strength as a position, which we've talked about in the past. So I think that 2025 as an ETA for him, especially if Juan Soto doesn't come back and he takes another big step leading into AAA this year, Jones, that is, there's a clear path for him, and you've got some youth to complement Judge in the outfield if Dominguez is able to come back from his elbow surgery and get back to that same level of effectiveness too.
Yeah, when you don't swing and miss in a spring game in an at bat, that's the stat that I will look at and take something from. All the productive numbers are great, but the fact that you're locked in and working a count the way you are is super impressive. Max, thanks, man. Appreciate you coming back on this week, and enjoy the Florida weather, and we'll definitely talk with you next Wednesday.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks as always. I'll talk to you soon.